Rhodes Old Town feels less like an isolated historical exhibit and more like a complete inhabited world enclosed in stone. It is a place where the past has not been tidily separated from the present, but remains embedded in the streets, buildings and rhythms of everyday life. Enclosed within its immense medieval fortifications, the town is one of the most complete and best preserved walled cities in Europe. Shaped above all by the rule of the Knights of St. John, yet layered with much older and later histories as well. Ancient foundations, Byzantine memory, Gothic ambition, Ottoman adaptation and modern Greek life all exist here in close proximity. The result is not simply a picturesque medieval quarter, but an urban landscape of unusual density and continuity, where history is not merely displayed but inhabited. The first impression of Rhodes Old Town is one of enclosure and strength. The city walls do not appear as decorative remnants, but as a vast and serious defensive system built for survival. They surround the medieval settlement in an irregular but commanding ring, creating the sense that the town was once conceived as both refuge and fortress. Their massiveness is central to their effect. Thick curtains of stone, angular bastions, towers, parapets, fortified gates and deep moats all speak of a city that expected attack and prepared for it with the utmost care. The walls seen today were largely shaped during the Knights' occupation, especially from the 14th to the 16th centuries, when Rhodes stood as one of the most important Christian strongholds in the eastern Mediterranean. Every projection and turn in the fortification reflects strategic calculation. These were not walls built merely to define a boundary, they were engineered as instruments of resistance, designed to absorb assault, command fields of fire, and prolong defence under siege. Walking around the perimeter or alongside sections of the moat, one becomes aware not only of the military intelligence of the site, but also of its theatrical grandeur. The fortifications rise with an austere magnificence, at once practical and symbolic. They project authority before one even enters the city, announcing that this was once a place of international consequence. Defended by one of the most disciplined military religious orders in medieval Europe. The relationship between town and wall is essential to the experience of Rhodes. The city is understood first as a protected interior, a carefully guarded world within a hostile wider landscape. Even now, with the threat of siege long gone, the walls preserve a powerful emotional effect. They create anticipation, separation, and a heightened awareness that entry into the old town is not casual but ceremonial. The gates reinforce this sense of transition. Passing through one of the principal entrances, especially the main gate, feels like crossing from one civilization of space into another. Outside lies the modern city with its wider streets, vehicles, shops, and open circulation. Inside begins a denser, darker, cooler realm shaped by stone, shadow, and compression. The gate is not simply a point of access, but a threshold charged with historical meaning. Its heavy masonry, defensive angles, and controlled passage make clear that it was created in a world where entrances were vulnerabilities to be defended at all costs. One enters not through an open invitation, but through architecture designed to monitor, slow, and protect. Yet this very defensiveness heightens the drama of arrival. The shift in atmosphere is immediate. Light narrows, sound changes, the scale becomes more intimate, and time seems to deepen. Once inside, Rhodes Old Town reveals its extraordinary complexity. It is not composed only of major monuments aligned for display, but of an entire urban fabric in which administrative, religious, domestic and commercial spaces are tightly interwoven. This is one reason the town feels so alive. Grand structures stand only a short distance from humble houses. Formal streets give way to crooked lanes, small courtyards and modest facades coexist with fortified palaces and churches. Unlike many historic districts that have become largely museological, Rhodes retains the impression of being a city rather than a relic. Shops open beneath old vaults, homes occupy medieval plots, cafes spill into small squares, and visitors move through spaces that still support ordinary life. That continuity gives the old town much of its emotional power. It does not simply commemorate the past, it carries it forward. At the heart of the old town lies the Street of the Knights, perhaps its most celebrated urban space, and one of the most remarkable surviving medieval streets anywhere in Europe. Its distinctiveness comes partly from its contrast with the surrounding maze. Whereas much of the town unfolds through irregular lanes and unexpected turns, the Street of the Knights is direct, formal and composed. Long, straight and gently rising, it leads towards the palace of the Grand Master, with a controlled sense of ceremonial progression. The paving stones underfoot, worn by centuries of passage, give the street a physical texture of age, while the high stone facades on either side create an atmosphere of discipline and restraint. This was not an ordinary street, but a centre of the order's institutional life. Along it stood the inns of the various tongues, the linguistic and regional divisions through which the Knights of St. John organised their international membership. Representatives from different parts of Europe were grouped into these national bodies, and the buildings associated with them gave the street a political as well as architectural significance. Coats of arms, arched entrances, carved details and severe stone walls all contribute to an impression of authority without ornament for ornament's sake. The beauty here is austere. It speaks of rank, duty, hierarchy and collective discipline rather than domestic comfort or mercantile display. To walk this street is to move through a carefully staged expression of power, where architecture embodied the ideals and organisation of a military order that was also a governing elite. The imagination is especially active here because the street remains so coherent. One can easily picture mounted knights, official envoys, clerics, servants and guards moving along its length. Hear the echo of footsteps on stone, sense the protocol that once governed these spaces. The street retains an almost ceremonial silence, even when occupied by modern visitors, as if its form still imposes dignity on movement. It is one of those rare places where urban design and historical memory reinforce each other so strongly that the past feels not reconstructed but latent. At the upper end of this route stands the Grand Master's Palace, the commanding architectural and symbolic focus of Rhodes Old Town. The building dominates not only because of its size, but because of the concentration of meaning it carries. It is at once fortress, administrative centre, and statement of sovereignty, with its towers, battlements, stone walls, gates, courtyards, and grand interior spaces, it expresses the full authority of the knight's regime. This was the seat of the Grand Master, the head of the order on the island, and therefore the political heart of Latin Rhodes. The palace embodied centralised command. From here, policy was directed, military readiness affirmed, diplomatic relations managed, and the prestige of the ruling order publicly staged. Architecturally, the palace combines severity with grandeur. Its fortified exterior conveys control and impregnability, while its internal spaces suggest hierarchy and ceremony. Broad staircases, halls, arcades, and decorative surfaces remind the visitor that this was not only a military citadel, but also a residence of a place of representation. It had to impress as much as defend. Even from the outside, one senses a deliberate balance between political fortification and monumental display. The palace rises above the surrounding streets like an unmistakable expression of rule, making visible the concentration of power that structured the town below. Its presence anchors the entire Old Town, giving the surrounding urban fabric a focal point both visual and political. Yet the greatness of Rhodes Old Town does not depend solely on those monumental spaces. Much of its enduring charm comes from the countless narrower streets and alleys that spread out in every direction from the principal routes. Here, the character of the town changes from formal to intimate. The main institutions recede, and the lived texture of the city comes into view. These alleys twist, narrow, widen unexpectedly, and branch into side passages that seem to resist planning from a modern perspective. Their irregularity is part of their appeal. They do not guide a visitor efficiently, they invite wandering, lingering, and accidental discovery. The surfaces of these lanes are often uneven, their stones polished by long use. High walls create cool corridors of shade broken by shafts of sunlight, small balconies, hanging plants, or timbered doors worn smooth with age. Some alleys are animated by commerce, souvenir shops, workshops, cafes and tavernas occupy old structures whose lower levels may once have served entirely different purposes. Others remain strikingly quiet, especially away from the busiest visitor routes. In those more secluded corners, the Old Town regains a sense of stillness that feels almost private. The soundscape changes from conversation and footsteps to the soft resonance of enclosed stone spaces, the distant murmur of square, or the flutter of movement behind shutters. These lesser streets are where Rhodes Old Town feels most human. Here one notices details that formal monuments cannot provide. Laundry strung across a passage, flower pots brightening a threshold, an icon or lamp fixed near a doorway, a weathered lintel reused from an earlier period, a courtyard partly visible through an iron gate, a cat sleeping against warm stone, or a small chapel almost concealed at a bend in the lane. Such elements soften the martial and institutional character of the great monuments. They remind the visitor that this fortified city was not only a headquarters of crusading power, but also a place where families lived, worked, worshipped, traded, and adapted to changing rulers over many centuries. This intricate network of alleys also reveals the layered cultural identity of Rhodes. The town is not uniformal, medieval in a narrow Gothic sense. Rather, its fabric reflects a long sequence of transformations, Byzantine traces survive beneath or alongside the structures associated with the knights. Ottoman rule introduced mosques, fountains, baths, and domestic alterations that changed the life of the city without erasing what came before. Later restorations and modern occupations added further layers. In many places, these periods do not appear neatly separated but physically entangled. A Gothic facade may stand near an Ottoman minaret. A Christian church may have undergone conversion and reuse. A domestic building may incorporate spolia from much early structures. This interweaving gives Rhodes Old Town a richness beyond stylistic purity. Its identity lies precisely in its accumulated complexity. For the visitor, the experience of Rhodes Old Town is therefore not only visual, but spatial and emotional. It is felt in the coolness beneath stone arches after the brightness outside, in the echo of footsteps on old paving, in the sudden opening of a hidden square, in the severe silhouette of a fortress wall against the sky, and in the awareness that the same spaces have long been used by soldiers, pilgrims, merchants, rulers, and residents. Few places preserve so vividly the impression of a medieval city as an actual inhabited environment rather than a stage set. Rhodes Old Town endures as a place of strength and texture, where history is compressed into stone and daily life continues inside it, giving the whole settlement its distinctive atmosphere of gravity, mystery, resilience, and beauty.